far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment, it's your time. You stood tall and now you see, standing in your destiny. 100 women growing strong. 100 women where you belong. You stood tall and now you see, you have reached your destiny. Woman, woman.
As people of African descent, we offer this land recognition in solidarity with the indigenous peoples of Turtle Island in the efforts and deliberate intentions toward decolonization. As people of African descent, we acknowledge the land of Turtle Island that sustains us, express deep gratitude to its indigenous peoples, and pledge to honor our dignity and divinity that ultimately connects us all. By Kay Johnson. Welcome to 100 ABC Fireside Chats. 100 Accomplished Black Canadian Women is a bold project initiated by co-authors and co-founders, the Honorable Dr. Jean Augustine, Dr. Denise O'Neill Green, and Donna Jones Simmons. Our mission is to celebrate and archive the professional accomplishments of trailblazing Black women from all across Canada. The goal is to create an ever-expanding database available for current and future generations via print media, public and private libraries, as well as our website, which is www.100abcwomen.ca. In addition to our fireside chats on topics that matter to our communities, such as education, healthcare, entertainment, creative arts, trade union, and so much more, we offer biennial book launching galas and biannual symposiums. The co-authors and co-founders would like to take this opportunity to thank each of you for attending today's fireside chat. We know that you will find these sessions educational and inspirational. So sit back, relax, and hear from our brilliant and talented honorees.
Happy New Year, everybody, and welcome to the first episode of the third season of our 100 ABC Women Fireside Chats. And today, I'm really excited because I'm one of those people who consider maybe writing a book or two or three, but even though a lot of us think about writing, we get overwhelmed thinking about the process and what goes into it. So we've got seasoned authors with us today who are going to talk to us about their writing journeys, and along the way, they're going to share some tips and tricks about publishing and getting their work out there. So We're going to hear from Rachel DeCoste. Rachel DeCoste is a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultant, and she calls herself a recovering software engineer. She is from Ottawa. She's been a community activist for over 30 years and worked with various organizations. Interesting fact about her, she worked on the 2008 and 2012 campaigns of one Barack Obama. She has published over 170 op-eds in French and English, and she has written extensively on systemic bias, anti-Black racism, immigration, socioeconomic policy issues in Canada. She's lived and worked in Washington, D.C., and currently she is polishing up a manuscript about her ancestry DNA-inspired trip to Africa, where she spent 6 months in 5 countries, and this experience connected her to the ancestors. Welcome, Rachel. And then we've got Norma Nicholson. Norma is a 4-time self-published author, speaker, educator, youth and adult mental health advocate. She's a retired RN with a BA in sociology and psychology and an MA in adult education. And as a recognized public speaker, she has an unwavering passion to invest in and influence societal change with a sincere desire to make a difference in the lives of youth. And due to her vibrant voice and catalyst for community growth, she has been recognized on many occasions for her volunteerism, mentorship, and advocacy. I should say the same for Rachel, because both of them are 100 ABC Women honorees, Norma being in 2018. Actually, I believe Rachel as well, being in 2018. So, ladies, I'd like to start actually with Norma first in terms of your writing journey, because I'm sure everybody is waiting with bated breath to find out how you became a writer.
Would you believe that I never thought that I could ever write a book?
Why not?
Because I thought writers, you had specific skills. For example, one had to have a degree in English or literature or something to be able to write a book. But my book that I was writing behind the scenes were my weekly journals. Having been a nurse for 46 years, one can only imagine some of the information that has been recorded in my journal. So when I retired, I thought, there are many people who would like to hear some of these stories. I would not be able to stand and say, this is what happens, but when I write it and I publish it, there are many individuals who want to read the book and also to share those stories. So I became a writer because I kept a journal. And in fact, my first book, all the words came directly from my journal.
Interesting. Rachel, what about you, your writing journey?
I've been writing since I was very young. In fact, in primary school, I wrote a poem that ended up in a book, a collection of poems and other writings from students. That was my first time being published. And then I got interested in public policy when the Huffington Post was new in Canada. And I wrote a couple of op-eds, submitted them to the regular establishment media. Nobody cared. Huffington Post came around and gave a voice to a Black person in Canada. I think they were one of the first, to be honest. And that begot about 150 some odd op-eds en français in English about everything, really. But I always had a lens that reinserted our presence into existence in all these policy issues. And then I I went to Africa, as you said in the beginning. I did a DNA test to find out where I was from before the Caribbean, and I went there. I chronicled what I was doing and feeling on Facebook, and the response was immense. And that's what begot the idea of turning that journey into a book that could be shared beyond just my Facebook family and friends.
So, question to both of you: before you decided that your idea that you wanted published was worth publishing, did you bounce that off uh, people in your immediate circle, just, just to make sure that you were heading on the right path, or you didn't care and you just said, I feel like this should be published, and to hell with what people think, I'm going to publish it? Norma.
I actually attended a one-day workshop on writing and how does one begin this journey. And it was held at Humber College. And after the workshop, which was 6 hours, we were afforded 2 hours to bounce ideas off the prof that taught on that Saturday. And then I decided I would start writing. And I came home and I wrote my first chapter that Saturday night as a draft and had
Mm,
the opportunity to send it to the prof. And she says, way to go, on the right track.
great. Rachel?
My journey was probably a little bit more organic in that I did not set out to write a book. People asked me to put this in writing, approached me about it, and I decided to go ahead. Of course, CNN covered a part of my story, the part where I meet somebody on the street, ask him for directions, and we became engaged 2 weeks later. That part was on CNN and went around the world. I got lots of responses, not just from the Black diaspora, but from people who are not related to our people, in Albania and Vietnam. And I thought this story maybe is bigger than I thought, and I should keep on writing. I finished writing. It took me 2 years to write the first draft, and now I'm doing the polishing portion to get it ready to give to a publisher and hopefully get published.
Yeah, we're going to get back to how you get on CNN before even actually publishing the book. That is totally amazing. Our third panelist has joined us, Nadia Elhan. She's an educator, artivist, and award-winning author of several books for children, including A Little Miss Lou and Malika. I was just talking about how I love your Malika books. Malika's costume was the 2021 TD Grade 1 book giveaway, and her books, Malika, Carnival Queen, and The Anti-Racist Kitchen 21 Stories and Recipes, were released in 2023. Nadia, like Norma, is an educator. She teaches elementary school and writing for children's courses at post-secondary institutions. She's a proud member of the Canadian Children's Book Center, the Society for Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and the Writers Union of Canada. Welcome, Nadia, to the conversation. I asked the other two panelists to talk about their writing journeys, so we'd like to hear about yours.
Wow, well, thank you so much. It's great to see you again, Sarah, and it's good to join you, everyone here, and greetings to all the panelists. I'm so excited, and I do apologize for being late. I had another appointment that went late. So, and about my journey, I've been a writer for I'd say probably around, like, my earliest memory is just enjoying the feeling of holding a pen and writing things down that I was excited about. So I remember doing that from the age of 6, and writing down stories a little beyond that. I did that for, school assignments, but even after school ended, I would love to write. I started keeping journal, and I started my first attempt at writing a novel. I was about 12 or 13. I didn't finish that, but I still have one of the novels that I try to write. And then I just like wrote for my school papers, high school, university. So I've always enjoyed writing, and that's always been something that I knew was going to be part of my life. But one thing about writing, I didn't know that I could make a career at it. I didn't know anyone who was doing that, and I didn't make that association between a livelihood. I thought that if I even if I were to pursue writing as a career, I'd start to hate it, and I didn't want to hate it. So I said, let me just leave this as my fun hobby. And it was probably until years later, I loved writing no matter what. But 2009, I I you might have heard of a school called the Afrocentric Alternative School. It was slated to be open. I was hired in June of that year, and I began looking for books for my classroom. I was supposed to teach the first grade, and I went to, at the time, I went to Knowledge Bookstore and a different book list. I was looking for books for grade 1 students. And I went to a bunch of bookstores here, and I tried to find what I could about that celebrated our Black history and Black culture. And I also went to a couple of Black bookstores in the US. And I have to say the selection of books at that time for that age group was so limited. And also a number of books were no longer in print. So I think that's when the seed for ideas, I started getting an idea to write a story. And I decided, I was trying to figure out what kind of story would it be. I thought it would be an early chapter book. But again, when you're teaching grade 1, some kids are ready for that, but a lot of them are still in the picture book and board book phase. So I was thinking about the kind of book I wanted to write. I took a teaching media course, and I decided to develop the idea a little bit. I write songs as well. I write poetry, so I wrote a song for this book, and then I somehow found out that George Brown College offered writing for children courses as part of their continuing ed program, and I thought, wow, this is great. It was really affordable. It was once a week, and I enrolled. So I took a writing for children class, part 1. Then I took part 2. Then they had a writing nonfiction for children class. And then they had an illustrating for children class. And I just took one course after the other and became like a snowball. I met authors that visited the course or who were teaching the courses. I learned about conferences. I joined associations where I could learn about the industry. And as that was happening, my confidence was starting to grow in my writing, that it was resonating, and I would try even reading some of my stories out to my students. And then once all that was starting to happen, I attended a workshop. Actually, 2 things happened. It was, I think, 2013. I decided to apply for my PhD, and I worked on these applications, and it all seemed to happen within a week. So I got this email that it was sitting in my inbox for a while, and they were looking for writers for a series. And my name was passed along because a person was contacted. They couldn't do it, but they gave them my name. And I thought this was a joke. I'm like, what are the chances of somebody out of the blue contacting me to write a book? Because I always heard how hard it is to get a book published, how people are in the slush pile and had to apply to hundreds of publishers before they get chosen. And here this is something sitting in my inbox. So that happened. And also I had written Malaika's costume in one of my writing courses, and it was the principal of my school who actually told me about a writing contest. So I had submitted the story and for the contest, and while I was preparing it, editing it, trying it out with my students, I said, hey, I think this is ready to see a publisher. So I sent the story to 2 publishers. One was of someone knew someone who was an editor at this publishing house, and I won't name this publishing house. The other publisher, it turns out that I actually met we have the term publishing house which is the company, but publisher is also the acquiring editor. So I met the publisher slash acquiring editor of the second publisher, who is now Groundwood Books. But at the time, she was with another house. I met her at a workshop that was held at a different book list. And the workshop was writing for children, how to get into the industry. I stayed in touch with her, and I met her in 2011. So I met her in 2011, wasn't sure, wasn't confident about my writing. And then in 2013, when I sent it to her, and she responded. And that very week, when I was sending out my application to the PhD program, which I didn't get into any of them, by the way. I got that email with a request for looking for writers. And also that same week is the week that I got the email from Sheila Berry, who's now deceased. She's passed away. But she sent me an email saying she likes the story and wants to see if it works on her list. And she wanted to set up a meeting with me. And I was just like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Everything was happening at once. So that's kind of where it started. Those two emails led to my first three books. The Sankofa Music and Media books, which are part of the Sankofa Black History Collection, published in 2015. And then Malika's Costume, which was published in 2016. Just to give you an idea of the length of the time, it was 3 years. So 2016 was published, and now I have 4 Malika books, and I have 9 books in total, and I'm working on more. And more.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow,
so that's it in a nutshell, long nutshell.
Yeah, but that's amazing how circumstances just sort of conspired to propel you along this journey. One thing I've heard from at least 2 of you is about taking courses, writing courses, attending conferences, and things like that. So is that good for every genre? First of all, writing and publishing, there are different genres. Maybe Rachel, you want to talk about the different types of writing and the kinds of things you can do to prepare yourself to succeed in whatever genre you choose.
So thank you, Sarah. I think it's important to set the table
Yeah.
because just like when you go to the movies, and if you love romance films and something's advertised as a romantic movie and you get there and you see a horror film, you're going to leave a really bad review. And the book industry is a little bit like that, meaning they do have genres, they do have categories, and you got to know what people expect for your particular genre and category and deliver on that. With, there's slight variations, but there's length, there's tone, there's standards for each one. So know what type of book that you're writing and make sure you know what is expected so that you deliver on that. That's first. Second of all, figure out what your end goal is. Are you just writing for yourself? Are you just writing so you have something to bequeath to your children? Or do you want to be the next Danielle Steele or name me a big writer, Terry McMillan? And those two will determine how you go about it. Now, if you're writing for yourself, there are no rules. Do whatever you want, whatever length, whatever style, spend as little as you can, in my opinion. But if you're trying to get published, there's 2 ways. Well, there's actually 3 ways. The official one, there's about 5 big publishing houses. They don't take solicitations. They want you to go through an agent. And as was mentioned before, getting an agent is its own endeavor. You can send query letters to 100 people. You might get one of those that will ask for your manuscripts, and then maybe you'll be chosen. It's difficult, not impossible, but it's hard. And then the second way to get published is do it yourself. We all know that Amazon offers that. There's about 3 million books published every year on Amazon. 3 million books. You will be a drop in that ocean. But if you master the art of self-promotion, marketing, if you have already a platform, that could work for you. But on average, the self-publishing books sell about 100 copies or less per author. Just want to make sure you know that. And the third way, which I don't recommend, is the vanity publishers. They will take your money and publish whatever you give them, usually of poor quality. If a publisher asks you for money, run.
Okay.
I'm gonna add
Okay.
to that as
Yeah.
well because
Nadia.
yeah, because the five major publishers they're out there, and we did see a couple of them do calls for submission for black authors. For some of them have imprints, and some of them did even calls without requiring an agent. In Canada, we have mid-sized publishers and smaller publishers as well, or micro presses that are independently owned sometimes. So Groundwood Books, which I have my Malika books published through. I have another upcoming book coming out with them this year, and then Owl Kids Books. There are a number of these publishers are smaller and they don't require agents. So some people choose to go that route just because of the access. And often, I know I could speak more for the Kidlit stuff. They've had some calls for submissions for diverse authors and creators. I'm really happy to see that they're still asking for these, because I've seen where they weren't asking, and then there was a wave after 2020 when a lot of publishers were seeking to diversify their lists. And then in terms of the education piece, I don't think it's absolutely necessary. I like I mentioned, I've been writing my entire life, but I wanted to get better at my craft, and that's something I continually do. I did my master's of fine arts in creative writing during the pandemic, so that's allowed me to now teach at the university and college level. But again, not everybody studies writing, and you can have an amazing talent at it without having to go the education route. It's just as I believe Rachel had said, what is your goal with your book? What is your goal with your writing career? Do you want to make a career out of this? Is this a book to promote your product or your field, or something you can give out at your own for your staff, for your training, that kind of thing. So I've decided that I wanted to make this my career, and I didn't mention that I am a cancer survivor, and I only mentioned that because that was a driving force. It made me realize that you have one life to live, and you need to do what makes you happy and fulfill your purpose, and that was important to me, and that's why I've pursued the writing with the passion that I did, and I made this, even the learning, and it just became all of, I just say, all consuming in a way.
Thanks for that,
Can I just
Nadia.
add to the education piece?
Yeah.
Some of you have access to these colleges and universities in time, and that's excellent. The web has a lot of free resources. There's a podcast called SHIT, I Didn't Know About Writing, that is excellent, that has interviews with agents and writers, and they share their experiences. So if you don't have the time or energy or resources to go to college, you can, like I do, spend your nights and evenings till 3 a.m. watching these things and consuming. And that's my mini PhD in fine arts.
Right.
Yeah.
There's different ways to go about it. Norma, we haven't heard from you in a while.
That's
Are
big.
you self-published, and like what is your process like?
I write nonfictions, real stories, events, and lived experiences, and I self-publish, and I have sold many, many books. And I don't sell many books off the Amazon platform. I do self-marketing. So, for example, if I'm asked by an organization that is having their AGM, we see what's happening in the world with our young people. And I've asked to come and speak about trauma. How is trauma impacting the behaviors of our Black males? How is it impacting the adolescents in our society? I take a ton of books with me because they're from my book. You can find chapters on what is a normal adolescent, Why is it that Black young men are not allowed to live normal adolescence? So an adolescent, I'll just share 3 or 4 characters. They are alive, they're creative, they get into trouble, they try out new things and not think of the consequences. They dress where their parents don't want them to dress that way. But if they dress with a hoodie on and their pants below their waist, when they go in public, they are criminalized that way. So from the contents of my book, I use as teaching tools to the many organizations that have invited me to speak. And my children's book, Nadia, I never set out to write children's book. I got a rescue puppy from South Korea. Along my street, there are many kids, and whenever I walk with Cody, I'm telling them the story about Cody, and a 6-year-old says, I want to see a book about Cody so I can tell my friends that I know Cody. So that's the way I started writing children's book. And then I get invited to family fairs. I go to several libraries in the region of Peel. I'm allowed to go to the library and read to children. And it's amazing writing children's book, how being the author, you learn, and then to see the eyes of those children. And when they want to have some fun, and I have to tell my mom about this, and they're all self-published books. The other thing I do, because I'm such a passionate individual for seeing potential in young people, I have one of my children's book is all cartoons, and I hired a 14-year-old this past summer to do the illustrations. His name is in his first book ever. And I have sold more than 100 of those books. They were pre-ordered, and children can just read the stories without reading the words. They just look at the pictures, and it brings families together. They're bonding where TV used to be the thing and iPhones are taking over discussion. Family children's book has brought families together, and the children are asking for more. So writing books will never go away. We always need print books.
I
And
agree.
there are so many publishers, I don't have that kind of money to pay them.
Yeah, but you seem to be doing quite well publishing, self publishing. Norma just brought up something of great interest to me. Um, Selling your books, getting your books out there, marketing your books. Are there do's and don'ts that people should know about? Once you've got your manuscript, the editor's gone through it, everything's ready to go. How do you get it out there?
Sorry, do you mean selling your book to a publisher, or are you talking about once the book has been published, selling, how to promote your book?
You know what? Both. If you're going through a publisher and you're not self-publishing, how do you
Yeah.
do both?
Okay. So I just wanted to and I'm pretty sure you touched on it. So there's self-publishers, there's vanity publishers, as Rachel mentioned, and then there's the traditional publishers, and then there are different types of those. And then traditional publishers, they don't require you to pay at all. They pay you. They pay you in advance, and then they pay you royalties based on your sales of the books. Or there are a few publishers that may not pay that advance, but they do pay you royalties. So when you're getting your book ready for a publisher, you are basically, I'm going to speak for traditional publishing. You are preparing your manuscript to be the best it can be, and it has to be as close to publishing quality, which means there's no mistakes. There's not even the no mistakes. It has to be a really solid story. So you want to send it to a publisher. If you're sending it directly to the publisher in the best case possible, you're producing a cover letter for it that's going to tout the quality of the story. What is a summary should be in there. Sometimes the summary is done in 1 or 2 sentences, and that's called like a log line. And then you are basically promoting why you are the best person to write the story, why you think the story is going to sell, and also if there are any similar stories on the market that are doing well, or why you decided to approach that publisher. So that's something I told my students. You want to make sure that your cover letter is succinct. In the olden days, not that long ago, you sent that in like an actual physical letter. Now we do that through email mostly, right? And this process is similar to getting an agent, because once you get that agent, the agent will do the selling it to the publisher. And when I say selling it, it doesn't mean that the publisher owns the story. You retain the rights for the story. But kind of like having, when you're selling your house and you hire a real estate agent, similar idea. You still own the house, you own that story, but you're hiring somebody, or they select you, or you apply to have someone to sell it on your behalf. And then in terms of when the book is out, that's actually another journey altogether. And in fact, I say that's more work, because when that book is published, right, then you're now trying to get it into the hands of the buyer. And if you have a traditional publisher, you have a team that's part of the publishing house that's going to do that. They have marketing professionals, they have publicists, they have, and depending on the size of the publisher, like if they're a mid-sized Canadian publisher, the chances are they're going to be doing that for the other books they sell, whether they publish 100 books a year. Your book is one of the 100. So you can't always rely completely on that publishing house to do all the work for you. You have to do a lot of the promotion yourself. Some authors embrace that, like I do. I'm a shameless self-promoter, and some authors don't. They don't have time, the resources, energy, and some just don't necessarily feel that is something that they should do. That's, but at the same time, I think, most authors, they want to see their book sell, right? So depending on, there's a lot of pavement pouting, sometimes, just, talking, getting to events, networking, sharing your book, that kind of thing. But again, if you have publishers, they can do a lot of that for you.
Can I just add a little bit to
Yeah,
that?
Rachel.
So at the beginning, Nania talked about that the letters that you have to write.
Yeah.
And that's actually called a book proposal. It has like a formula, and I would describe it as a business proposal for a book. And in that, just like if you were asking for a bank to fund your business, you have to have a business plan. You have to know who your customer is. You have to imagine what other similar businesses are in that field. It's the same thing you do, but for a book. And I would suggest, if you're whether you're going to self-publish or go through a publisher, that exercise is actually really good in figuring out where your book would fit in the library or at the book store. So that's a good exercise that I actually enjoyed, figuring out what's like my book. And even if you can, go read the books that are similar to yours and figure out, did you do a good job comparing to those people? Are there elements that they included that you didn't, that you could add? So it's really it's a craft writing a book, but it's also a craft in preparing it to market. And I, as a first-time novel writer, underestimated the amount of time and energy I was going to spend I thought writing it was the big job, but actually after you write is even bigger. But it's fun. If you like your subject, it can be fun. It's a learning experience. And the good news is, if you go through all of that and you publish, you don't have to do it a second time. You kind of know how to do it the second time. So I feel like I hope it's a one-time learning thing, and that I can just pump them out like Nadia and Norma do.
Yeah. So I've got a question from someone in the audience, which is sort of related to a question I'm going to ask after. So she has self-published 4 journals and 1 joke book for her daughter, but she has one that's in limbo because it's based on real life people, and they haven't been able to get a release from 4 of the 6. So this, of course, applies to when you are writing about real people, real situations, real events, etc., etc. How do you manage that? Do you have to go and get a lawyer to write up, release forms and things like that? Do you have to get written permission from all these people? How much license should you give yourself when you are writing about real people and real events? I'm going to ask Norma this because you talk about you've been talking about incarcerated youth, or the over incarceration of youth, and you're a mental health advocate, so and a nurse as well. So a lot of your writing is also based on your professional background. What are your thoughts on that?
My lived experiences, I always ensure I have a disclaimer, and I
Mm-hmm.
to read the disclaimer. And what I say is that the story may seem like your reality, but in fact, if you have identified yourself in any of these stories, they are written, they're very sensitive, and there's no mention of your name at all. So should you be identifying with any of these individuals, it could be you, maybe it's not you, but I never use anyone's real name, though they're real stories. So here's an example. A young officer has put a handcuff around a 6-year-old arm and legs. And I mentioned that the officer is a Black officer and traumatizing a Black 6-year-old. So I know the officer, I know the family, but I would never ever mention any more details because there's a lot of details behind that. The idea of writing that as part of the story is that how trauma can begin at 6 years of age and follow you through your lifetime unless you receive professional help.
Mm-hmm. I like the
Another
idea of the
way,
disclaimer.
sorry, another way I've seen people get around that is turning their non-fiction book into a fiction book. And that way they have all the licenses because everything's fiction and fake.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But would you
I
would you still put a disclaimer that says at the beginning, the characters and situations depicted are in no way, you know,
I
reflective of people in real life? Nadia.
um yeah, I took a nonfiction class, and we did talk about this because and I'm trying to remember everything because I don't want to be incorrect in what I share, but I can say this. Um, when people write nonfiction books, or when you write a memoir, it's truth, but there are a couple things that we may, as readers, as real as the story is, as much as is shared, there may be areas that are omitted or changed just slightly to protect identities. So it depends on the book, because if you're writing nonfiction, you're writing about something that in fact did happen. Um, but again, we live in a world where people can just, say this sounds like me, or you misrepresented me, and take you to court. So I don't want to miss I don't want to incorrectly state it, but there are ways around it. And just like Rachel said, you could take something that has happened and fictionalize it as well, right? Or in fact, a lot of autobiography, or yeah, people write biographies autobiographies. They do that, or they leave some things out. And I know it's scary sometimes to write about a personal experience, and sometimes you just want to even protect yourself by not mentioning certain details or slightly changing them just to protect your own identity or your own personal information.
Thanks for that. So how do you go about writing about difficult, sensitive topics, especially those of you who write for young people and kids, Norma and Nadia? How do you bring up things like uh, sexual identity, racism, violence, abuse, that sort of thing? How do you go about that?
I tend to use research. What does the research say? And in that way, I'm building a concrete base. And then I say what I have observed or what others have shared. And as Rachel mentioned, there is so much online, whether you go Google or many other different ways. So if I am writing about violence in young people, I look at what research has been done, what has been used to taper the violence, and I look in several countries, and then I compare to what I see in Canada, and then I suggest what we can do in Canada. So it's all concrete, and I can say I was standing at the bus several weeks ago waiting for a bus going to downtown Toronto, where I observed two youth fighting each other. One was Caucasian, one was Black. The police officer came along, parted this fighting, took the Black youth away, and sent the white youth home and say, I will get in touch with your mother. So if you were observing this situation, whether you're Black or white, what would be your thoughts? My thought was, which I wrote in my book, is that this is blatant racism, treating one young man different from the other. So as Nadia's mentioned, I talk about situations. I don't use people's names, but they can sometimes identify. And I've covered myself in saying it's situations I have observed. It is situations that have been researched. It is situations that have been documenting in Policing Young Lives by Maynard, because Robin Maynard has written a book, and I can say very similar situation has been written by Robin in her book Policing Black Lives in 2017, page 20. Yeah.
Nadia?
Yeah. And on that note about writing for young people, do not shield young people from, I don't shield them because they're exposed to so much and they know a lot. And I hope that my books will be a source of information, inspiration, and even a guide to help them through some of the tough stuff. There's no reason, I think, at every topic, there's no topic that can't be spoken about in an age appropriate way. My most recent book is called The Anti-Racist Kitchen, 21 Stories and Recipes, and 21, I'd say 21 plus myself, and then the forward writer who's 14. That's 23 people sharing stories about racism, which is most of us have experienced racism at a very young age, you know, and we need resources and books to help kids to know they're not alone, to know that there's a hope, there's a way out, and have some tools to get through certain situations. I would also advise reading widely, reading as many books by, especially if you're hoping to write about sensitive topics, read the books that are out there that have already been written. See how the topics have been addressed and treated, right? Because I think the kid, that might not be the book that your kid needs or you need, but there are many kids out there that need books about specific topics. So read and see how they're handled, they're they're written about, and there's no reason why you can't have books about certain topics, but it's just how we talk about it. How do we handle it? My recent Malika book is called Malika Carnival Queen. It's a book about grief, and it's a book about how we overcome it, how a child overcomes her grief and her sense of loss, and also learning about the migrant farm workers. I never saw a book about that, and migrant farm workers are part of my family history. So again, it's how do we talk about that? We know how difficult, based on the news and all the things that are happening for migrant farm workers that come to Canada. It's a very difficult situation to be in, and they're all that, but they also have children too, right? And kids need to know about this stuff. So again, how do we talk about this stuff? We do it in an age appropriate manner, and we also look at what's out there already.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for that, Rachel. So you're writing about your African experience, and there's always this sort of tension between what the Middle Passage descendant diaspora Black person encounters and the stories they told themselves about what they would encounter. Did you find you had to kind of censor yourself in terms of how you described
I didn't
your...
censor myself at all, which is, anybody who knows me, that's how I am. I did change some people's names to protect them, but everything I wrote is true. I will say that I tried to balance some of my, anti-Africanness with humor, self-deprecating humor. Two quick examples. When I went to Africa the first time, a third of my big suitcase was my own personal pharmacy. I brought my own personal CVS or Shoppers Drug Mart because there's no healthcare in Africa. I have to have my own Tensor, my own Advil, my own everything in case. And to my surprise, when I arrived in Senegal, well, they have pharmacies in every neighborhood. It's not a backwards country or a backwards continent, and that was I use that to show that even as an Afro descendant who I thought was woke, I came with my own prejudices, and I talk about how heavy, physically and emotionally, that baggage was. So I think there's ways of using that uncomfortable truth as a learning opportunity it was for myself, and hopefully it'll be for the readers. But no, I don't self-censor at all. I say what I really thought, and I think I know better now. And I also show that in the book that, those assumptions were wrong, and I look like an idiot. It's not me making fun of others. It's me making fun of how ignorant I was, and how, thank God, I'm better now.
Yeah, I love that. Self-deprecation as a tool to sort of, break that tension. Speaking of tools, Rachel, you said you're a recovering software engineer. We have to talk about, the editing process and artificial intelligence, because AI has come up a lot lately in academic publishing, especially. What are your thoughts on that? The use of artificial intelligence.
So I'm a software engineer, and I also worked on AI projects in the 90s when it was new or newer. And when I worked in Washington, D.C., my nonprofit held AI policy discussions on Capitol Hill. So I'm close to this subject. I would say that AI can be used for good and for evil. When you talk about good, it's already out there. If you use Microsoft Word and you ask it to translate for you automatically, that's AI. There are many writing tools online. Grammarly makes suggestions for your text based on AI. It's already among us. Now, when it's used for evil or for bad, it's when you use it to write for you, or use it to make decisions for you. Especially when it comes to I open a parenthesis, but AI-based face recognition systems don't do well for Black and Brown people, and that's a big issue. But they don't do well when they are asked to invent because it's not always correct. So as a writer, I suggest that if you feel comfortable, you use it to make your writing stronger with some of these apps that could take a sentence and make it more sensory, or make it more details, or add fluency. Like there's several linguistic styles that AI can suggest for you without writing it for you. But if you say, write me a travel book, it'll write you a travel book. It'll have errors in it. That's probably not a good way to use it. And Amazon and other publishers will refuse to publish if you use that tool that way. So, but it's here, it's not going away. But if you're a writer and if you're taking this seriously, you want those stories and those narratives to come from yourself and your thought and your mind, which will always be better than anything a computer can come up with.
Thanks for that, Rachel. Norma, do you use AI in your writing? You'll have to unmute yourself. We can't hear you. Yes.
Introduce my stimulus for writing children's book. Here's Cody. He came to look at where his mom was. Say
Okay.
hi. Bye. No, I don't use AI at this time because I don't understand much about it. I use Grammarly, Business Grammarly, which checks my grammar and the way I write my sentences. So I am also learning from that, because one of the weaknesses I had, and I don't know who else has this, I will be talking about a person and I said that as opposed to who. And all the time, my teachers used to correct me, and now Grammarly does. So I'll write something about that, and then it says who. So I use Grammarly, but I have not been highly engaged in AI. I read about it. I was at a hairdresser some time ago, and she took up her phone and she asked the question to AI to say, who is it that makes the rain fall? And then she uses AI in everything, but I haven't yet learned how.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
Nadia?
use in my writing, I may in the future, but right now when I write, I always have at least two other authors or someone who is an editor, not professionally, but right now my book is being edited by an author who has written 7 books. So even after Grammarly, she still goes through it and say this needed to flow better into the conversation. So because I self-publish, I do not just write and publish. I reread my writing 3 times. I get at least 2 other individuals to write it, and then I change it a 4th time to see whether the feedback I receive from them, I want to change what I have written. Yeah, so I don't just publish what I write. I need to go through certain steps, because my first book, after I received the sample, I realized, wow, there are certain things, words were joined together accidentally. There were sentences that were too long. There were words that were used over and over. And if I did not have the opportunity to get that sample, I would not have changes made before the book was published. So that's another thing I do. When I finalize the book and I upload it, I always ask for a sample. And I take maybe a whole day to go through the sample word by word, line by line. And I may even find a few things I have to change. So for now, I'm my own AI.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. Nadia, do you use artificial intelligence in the
No,
editing
I don't.
process?
No, I don't use AI. I have. I know there's in the last year we heard a lot about Chat GPT, and from what I understand about it, it's I mean, just like Rachel said, it's already AI has been around for a long time, in terms of just the small ways that we have it's already been integrated in our computer systems, like how we, use it. But in terms of writing text, it wouldn't be possible as an author. Like publishers are already aware of that, so the process of getting your manuscript selected to be published into a book is so competitive and so difficult. They're not in terms of like the numbers. The publishers receive thousands of submissions and publish only a select number of books. So they are looking for, that would be something already on their radar. I do want to say though that as for Chat GPT and some of the programs, a lot of them have been using the work of established authors and writers to train the computer programs. So that is something I don't agree with, but it's already happened, right? So there are a number of authors whose books have been used to train these programs. So they're using work of authors without giving them the financial pay from that. So that's the stuff that I have a trouble with. But as Rachel had said, it's already here. It's been around for a long time, and my thing is just I guess as a picture book author, I know how long it takes to write a picture book. I have picture books that I've been working on for years, and then for them to finally get put out there. Whereas, let's be honest, there are some authors who may choose to go that route with AI and produce a book using all artificial intelligence, including the illustrations. But again, I have to just stay in my lane and just focus on the work that I do. It's not I know why I'm doing this. I know the importance of the stories that I tell. So I'm just going with that. Yeah.
Yep. Thanks for that. For our audience, just so you know, you can drop your questions in the chat if there are more questions, but I'm going to ask all three of you. One, the most difficult part of your writing journey so far, and two, the most satisfying part of your writing journey so far. Rachel?
Sorry. I'll start because
okay.
The most difficult part of my writing journey was telling my personal story. And that is my very first book called Young Lives on the Line. Because I'm hearing about our African heritage, you don't want to say many negative things about your own culture. So you have to frame it in a way that they did not know, they were learning, they came out of the colonial stuff. So I wanted to write my story because it was causing me trauma. I would reflect on it and I thought nobody would ever believe. I hear you say, Nada, you were writing from you were 6 years of age. I was never entered into a school building then. I wasn't allowed to go to school. I went to school when I was 9 years old. And of course, I was bullied and all the things that happened to children who were just learning at that time. But I wanted to share my story because I wanted young people to know that a mentor can make a difference. It just takes one adult who really loves you to help you to move along to reach your potential. And that was so hard for me. I started so many times and I stopped because I just think people are never going to believe this happened to me. And how did you manage? And then even when I wrote my book, I'm on another series now. When I wrote my book and some people read it, they say, have you been watching Oprah? Somebody told a tale like this on Oprah. Then they found out it wasn't true. And then I looked at the person and say, I'm hearing you say this because I am Black. The person Oprah spoke to was a white individual, because I was born to a single mom who did not know what to do. And I have forgiven her, I love her, etc. But I was abandoned. I had no one at the age of 6 months. And I hesitated telling that story, but it was impacting my life in that I didn't feel my value and my worth. Once I got someone to counsel me and support me and say, you have to write it, you have to publish it, you have to use it as a background to help others grow and things that they can overcome, then I was on my way to writing. And I think that is why I write nonfiction, because I have used my story for others to learn from not only what happened, but to forgive others and to also share second chances. When someone done you something wrong, give them second chances. So that's the hard part. The second part, why I love being an author, not only do I, when I go to some, I'm a member of Mississauga Art Council, and they have an annual book sale and art sale. And I'll hold up one of my book. I'm just reaching for it. This book, I don't know if you can see it, but it has when I was a nurse and we wore caps and stuff like that. And I'll have this displayed on the table. And I'll say, that used to be me. And someone will say, you wrote that book? Yes, I did. And if you really want to know the real story, I can tell you in a synopsis, but you need to purchase the book, have a cup of tea and enjoy it. So I love sharing the contents of the book and also sharing how people can change and how people must be forgiven so you have joy in your life, though you have been hurt by others.
That's
Yeah.
very inspiring. Thanks a lot, Norma. Nadia.
One of the things that I experienced as a writer, a challenge, is it's a long journey, and I look at it as more like a marathon. It's not a sprint.
Mhm.
And I made the decision that I was going to do this as this is a calling, and that I'm going to be doing this as long as I can do this. So that's a lifelong commitment. So during that time from I guess 2011 when I made that decision to now and continuing on, knowing there's a lot of waiting involved when you even when you have a publisher interested in your manuscript, you sign the deal and it can be anywhere from 2 to 5 years until your book gets out there. So during that time, you need to support yourself, right? You need to financially support yourself. You can't just only, say, I sold the book, story, it'll be out there. You have to financially support yourself. So what I found, like a lot of authors, we wear many hats to support ourselves. And I'm working on other stories always, but because of the nature of the industry, we have often to wear many hats. So, when I was in grad school, I was doing my studies, I was working on books, I was hosting online reading series like this, I was presenting, I was teaching courses. So it's just, and when I talk to my author colleagues, a lot of them are doing many things. Some of them have other careers. I'm a teacher, so I do teach elementary school. But because of that, I sometimes I have it slows down. Like I want to keep writing more books, but I have to keep a balance basically. So that I say is a challenge for me, because if I could have it, I would love to just spend almost all my time doing the writing piece, but it's also the promotion and all the other things, right? So that's just part of the way that it is as authors. And then in terms of what I like, one of the things that I absolutely love, I love sharing my stories, and I love to hear when it lands with somebody. I love to hear from my audience. I love getting testimonials. I love to be in schools and meet students and have their teachers share with me how my stories have impacted them. And I also get to travel and go to schools and present in I've presented in the US and I presented in other places, and I've I actually presented in the Middle East, England, Jamaica, Trinidad. And I find everywhere I go, the kids are essentially the same inside. They love stories, and there's the universal when that story hits and they really get it. It's this thing. I'm like, I have the best job in the world. This is amazing. This is fun. And the little kid in me that used to write stories is just would never have dreamed that this would be what I get to do, and I get paid for it too. This is like what I get to do. So I'm living my dream basically, and that's the best part of it all.
I absolutely love that. Rachel, the toughest part so far in your writing journey for this particular book?
Well, actually, I have to go further back. I told you that I got published when I was in grade school, grade 3, and then there's a gap there. The Huffington Post was 20 years later, and there's a reason for that. Is that in high school, I guess I had a talent, and I wrote a short story in high school, and I was accused of. Apparently, I wrote it in a way that was quote 2 or 3 years more mature than my cohort of advanced placement classmates.
Wow.
And that obviously meant that it had to be plagiarized because it's impossible for the only Black girl in the classroom to write that well. And having that failing grade, which affected my grade for the class and for my whole GPA suffered, was a trauma that I lived, and I stopped writing for literally almost 20 years. So the hardest part was in getting back on this writing journey um, is not just reliving those traumas, but realizing how I got to this point. And writing my memoir has also, because when you write a memoir, it's good to, or any book, it's good to have a character arc, which means you want to start with a certain emotional state, or start with a normal, go through struggles, and then reach a new normal. And that kind of meant I had to go back and say how I know at the end of the novel, I'm an Afro file, but at the beginning, to the beginning of my life, I was maybe Afrophobic a little bit. I told you about how I brought a pharmacy because I didn't think they had pharmacies there. So it was about really revisiting some of those ways that I was taught, overtly or covertly, wrongly, about our ancestry and ourselves. And that was hard to kind of realize how poorly I was taught. And that was hard. But the positive part of this is that even though my book hasn't been published yet or even found a publisher, it's the story has already gone around the world. I've already had positive effects on Afro people in the diaspora, and even a few people who are African immigrants who've read the manuscript and laughed at my self-deprecating humor. And that positive effect is sort of what I wanted. I'm going to be blunt and say I'm writing FUBU, for us, by us. And my goal is to get everybody that's Black to re-embrace, if they haven't already, our ancestry. And I've, even before the book is published, even with the CNN story, it has had some effect, and that's the best reward. And I hope to keep on doing that in other spheres of activity. I didn't talk about this before, but I actually started writing a children's book, partly because I am a mother of an African child. When I knew I was going to become a mother or a stepmom, I looked for books about children of color who immigrate to the West. I couldn't find any. In fact, I found a book about snow and I colored one of the characters' skin brown so my kid could see himself in the story before coming to Canada. And my hope is to, after this memoir, start on children's books so that other children like my son can see themselves and not have to have their mom color some person brown in the children's book.
Well, Nadia has some books that you might want to purchase
Yeah,
for your
I have them
library.
already.
I'm just saying. I'm just saying.
I was just typing actually. My Malika series is about a girl who migrates from the Caribbean to Canada and all the many gifts that experience and challenges that experience brings.
Yeah. So to close out this amazing conversation, your final words of advice to anyone who tuned in to this conversation and might be inspired to start a writing journey. What would your advice be, Norma?
Right, right, right. I was looking at Lincoln about 2 years ago, and there was a young Black man that says, I would like to write a book about going back to Jamaica to help children there. I don't know where to start. I've heard that they need help. And I responded and say, I can be of help for you. And then he thought, no, that's not possible. And I connected with him by email. We came off social media and I met with him several times and I helped him to write his book. He had to stop several times and I say to him, no, you've started this journey. You've got to finish it. And in his book, at the front of the book, the foreword, he says, Norman Nicholson pushed me until I learned how to write. And now I'm using those skills to teach children in Jamaica. So write and change. And on your journey, join with other authors. You see, what we do today is so dynamic. You are always learning from someone. I joined the Mississauga Writers Group. I'm a senior on the Writers Group of Canada. I'm also a member of the Mississauga Art Council. So you get together with other writers. You are always learning. We have what's called a critique session where we send something in to the person who wants to critique it, and then she gives us feedback. Each of us just write a page or something. So what I'll leave you with, if your heart's desire is to write, get someone alongside you who will be encouraging you. And even when you seem like you're failing, if that person is your sponsor or your mentor, you will be successful. When that first book arrives from the publisher, you will be so elated you want to share it with the world.
Thank you so much, Norma. Get writing, persevere, get a writing buddy, and yeah. Nadia.
Oh my gosh, Norma, I think you nailed all of them on the head. I said, oh, I was gonna choose the first one you said. You said about 5 different things. I'm like, oh no, she took all my ideas. But one thing I definitely want to say is just go on your path. Your path is your own. I think it's easy to compare. I'm guilty of it sometimes. Looking at others and seeing where they're headed and why this is not happening or why that's not happening. Just focus on your path. Your time will come. Just do all the things that Norma suggested, and it's a matter of time. Like I think, like I said, it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And everybody's timing is different. Publishing is unpredictable. We can't predict it. The directional goal. Sometimes you don't know which book is going to be the next hit or which book will, have high expectations for, and it doesn't do as well as you would think, right? So just focus on the journey and enjoy it. Celebrate every milestone. I celebrate everything. I've had book launches for every book, 9 book launches and more. So I just don't take it for granted, because each of those is a milestone. Just focus on your journey and know that good things are coming.
Thanks so much for that, Rachel.
The reason I started writing in the Huffington Post and other op-eds, and the reason why I'm writing my memoir, it's inspired by what Toni Morrison had said. She's a very known African American playwright. I believe she won a Nobel Prize or one of those Pulitzers or something. And she said, if there's a book that you want to read but it hasn't been written, then you must write it.
Yes.
And as about Black women, especially in the West, there's a lot of our stories that haven't been written. We weren't allowed to read or write for 400 years, so we have a 400-year backlog to make up for. And you have the tools now. You have the ability. I'd say write as much as you can. Write the full novel and then edit and fix it. So just vomit, for lack of a better word, and then fix it. Um, that's the first advice. Second one, vomit. And then the third one is critiquing is actually a very good tool where you can read things and sort of see where the errors are, which helps you critique your own work. And there's a free critique circle. The groups that Norma mentions are great if you have one in your neighborhood and if you can attend. But there's a free one online, QT Critique, where you get points for critiquing other people's work. And after you accumulate enough points, you can ask people to critique your work. So it's an exchange, and it's a fair exchange. And I've got excellent critiques from people who don't know me online. I really, really enjoy that tool. And if you can afford it, pay for beta readers or editors online on Fiverr that can do this professionally. And I've gotten great ideas and great um, uh, specific points to address in the manuscript based on that. So it's a great tool, and I recommend you use it as much as possible.
Well, thank you very much, all three of you. Oh, I see a book.
This is the book that I assisted this young man to write.
Wow.
I did not know him at all until I saw that he really wanted to write a book. And it's Elisa Martinez, and it's called Christ and the Justice System. And he has written a whole page in there that says, I want to give a special shout out to Norma. You have journeyed with me from start to finish in the writing process of this book. You motivated me, you lectured me, you inspired me. I am truly grateful that you pushed me, and now I'm loving what I do.
That is fantastic. It's a fantastic example of mentorship in the writing process. Rachel, you had a book up as well.
This
What
is a
book are you holding up?
suggestion for first-time writers. There is a recurring book by Chicken Soup for the Soul. They're always looking for short stories. It's a great way to get published by a traditional publisher for the first time, and you only need to have 1,000-word story. One of these Chicken Soup for the Soul books came out 2021, and it's all 101 stories of Black women writers. I'm one of them. And that was my first time being published by a traditional publisher. And it's good for your writing resume when you're pitching for your own personal book. Well, you say, look, it's not my first time. I have experience. So I recommend looking for these story collection books. It's a good first step to get published.
That's
Yeah.
great.
And
Do you have
I
a
just
book with you, Nadia?
I don't, unfortunately, but I did put my website in the chat. So please
Yeah.
visit nadiaelhan.com/book, and you'll see all of my books. And I'm really happy to say that my 2 books that came out last year, Malika Carnival Queen, and then also the Anti-Racist Kitchen 21 Stories and Recipes, getting really great reviews, and it's been very encouraging. One thing I forgot to mention is you definitely need to read a lot. Read as widely as you can, and that just to add to what Rachel said, yes, you can take the courses, but DIY MFA, do it yourself, Masters of Fine Arts in Creative Writing. Learn as much as you can on your own. You can learn so much by just reading widely. We have so many talented Black Canadian authors, and so many books that I just think are just waiting for you to read. So please support our community's authors by picking up our books and purchasing them or borrowing them from the library, because as much as we want to get our books out there, I feel sometimes there are so many authors out there that they just we need to support our own, basically.
Yeah.
And it's like kind of each one teach one, because the publishers for many years have said there's no market for our books. No one's going to read our books. They already chose their Black book for the year. But again, if we support each other and are buying our own books, we are also demonstrating there is a need for these books. There is a market for these books, and it'll make it easier for our own books to be published.
You know what? You stole my thunder completely, because I'm always the one that's up on my soapbox talking about we need to support our Black authors, our Black artists, our Black creators, etc., etc. We have to invest in our people to make sure that, you know, all this output and creativity continues. Thank you so much, all three of you, for your inspiring writing journeys. I'm sure there are people who hadn't even envisaged writing who are now inspired to do that. And I'd just like to remind the audience that these are only 3 of the authors we have among our 100 ABC Women honorees. There are many more. Please check out the 100 ABC Women website to find out who all the other authors are as well. Thank you so much, all 3 of you, for joining us.
Bye.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Read,
Bye,
and write,
thank
write,
you.
write.
Bye.
Look how far you have come on your own, but never alone. Through the rain and through the shine, here's your moment. It's your time.